the Augustaion, Constantinople. The 1460s, a decade had passed since the fall. The Byzantine chronicler Doukas recorded what the equestrian statue at the Forum had meant. The bronze figure depicted Justinian, his right hand extended eastward. It pointed, Doukas wrote, toward the direction from which the conquerors had come. In his reading, that gesture had always been a prophecy. 9 centuries earlier, the historian Procopius described the same statue. Writing around 554 of the Common Era, Procopius gave the gesture no prophetic meaning. The hand threatened Persia. It commanded the Eastern barbarians to remain at peace. The gesture did not change in 9 centuries. The reading did. Between those two accounts lies the subject of this episode. Procopius composed his account of Justinian's buildings around 554 of the Common Era. He was the court historian. He had direct access to the construction program. In the Aedificiis, Book 1, he describes the statue's location. It stood on a high column at the Augustaion, the main forum in front of Hagia Sophia. Justinian wore full military dress and a plumed helmet. His right hand extended east. Procopius recorded the gesture's meaning without ambiguity. The hand commanded the Eastern barbarians to remain at peace. It threatened Persia. Procopius is the only source who describes the statue from life, before any prophetic reading existed. What he documents is an imperial monument with a conventional military gesture. The post-fall sources are a different category of evidence. Doukas composed his chronicle in the 1460s. He was not present in Constantinople during the siege. He compiled from witnesses and surviving reports. Laonikos Chalkokondyles wrote his histories across the 1460s through the 1480s, 2 to 3 decades after the fall. His Omen accounts are more elaborated than those in Doukas. Neither man is a witness to the original statue. Both are witnesses to what the post-fall tradition assigned to it. That distinction is the analytical foundation of this episode. Doukas and Chalkokondyles are cited here not despite their distance from the events, but because of it. The elaboration between them is the mechanism made visible at the source level. More Omen accounts, more detail, more significance assigned to each event. The Omen grew across decades because the need for it grew. One complication must be named. Post-fall accounts may not all describe the same monument. The Augustaion held multiple statues. Procopius is the definitive identification for the Justinian equestrian figure. Later attributions require source-critical care. The variability in these accounts is not a problem, it is the evidence. The Ottoman conquest came from the east. Justinian's right hand pointed east. That coincidence was real and it mattered. But coincidence is an enabling condition, not a cause. What the directional alignment provided was availability. The gesture already existed in the right orientation. The disaster provided the need to read it. Neither element alone produces a retrospective omen. Together, they produce the mechanism. A catastrophic collapse creates interpretive pressure on the physical environment it leaves behind. Monuments that stood for centuries with stable, unremarkable meanings become available for reinterpretation. The disaster does not alter the object. It alters the framework through which the object is read. What was an imperial gesture becomes a prophetic one. Not because the gesture changed, because the interpretive community changed, and changed catastrophically. The Justinian equestrian statue had stood at the Augustaion since the 6th century. For 900 years it communicated military authority over the eastern frontier. Justinian had campaigned against Persia. His right hand's orientation was a record of that campaign, specific, documented, without eschatological dimension. Then the Ottoman army entered from the east. The emperor died at the walls. The framework through which the statue had been read for 9 centuries collapsed with the city. It was replaced by the framework of survivors explaining catastrophe. The documentary evidence of this transition is visible between the two post-fall sources. Doukas, writing in the 1460s, roughly a decade after the fall, records Omen accounts that are restrained. Chalkokondyles, writing 2 to 3 decades later, records accounts that are more elaborated. He assigns greater significance to each pre-fall event. The Omen was not discovered whole. It was assembled across decades. Each stage of the assembly reflects the community's increasing need to find explanation in what came before. The Justinian statue was not the only element assembled into this retrospective text. Runciman and Crowley both record that the statue was melted down by the Ottomans after the conquest. The object ceased to exist in 1453 or shortly after. The prophetic tradition attributed to it did not cease. The omen attributed to the gesture persisted in post-fall Greek writing from the late 15th century onward. What survived was not the monument. It was the interpretive need the monument had come to serve. Doukas records a broader omen cluster around the fall. Light from Hagia Sophia's dome the night before the final assault. Fog during the bombardment. The eclipse of May 22nd belongs to the same cluster. The preceding episode in this series examines it. Each follows the same structure as the statue tradition. The monument did not predict the disaster. The disaster made the monument into a prediction. This pattern is not unique to Constantinople. Rome recorded its own version in the prodigia tradition. Prodigia were extraordinary events, including rains of stones, monstrous births, and lightning strikes on temples. They were officially reported to the Senate and evaluated for religious significance. Livy's Ab Urbe Condita catalogues them year by year across books 21 through 45. Raymond Bloch, in his 1963 study of the tradition, identifies a diagnostic pattern. Prodigia cluster more densely around years of military disaster than around years of success. Events were remembered as omens after the disasters, not forecast before them. The natural environment was converted into a prophetic text. The conversion was performed by the disaster, not by the events themselves. Rome demonstrates the mechanism at the level of events. Babylon demonstrates it at the level of a physical object. In 689 before the Common Era, Sennacherib sacked Babylon. The Assyrian king removed the statue of Marduk to Nineveh. Marduk was the city's chief deity. In Babylonian theological tradition, the departure of the divine statue was equivalent to the deity withdrawing his presence. The city had been abandoned by its god. Under Esarhaddon and later Assurbanipal, the statue was returned and reinstalled. The return was framed as Marduk's reoccupation of the city. What the Babylonian tradition then did with this sequence is documented by Grayson. His Assyrian and Babylonian Chronicles, published in 1975, provides the chronicle record. Marduk's departure was retrospectively read as prophetic. The god had not simply been taken. He had communicated, through his statue's removal, that Babylon's fall was sanctioned. The removal, already complete, was reframed as divine prediction. The parallel to Constantinople is structural. In both cases, a physical object was assigned prophetic meaning after a catastrophic event. In both cases, the object's physical fate, removed to Nineveh and melted down, did not prevent the omen tradition from persisting. The disaster did not produce the monument. The disaster produced the monument's prophetic function. In Rome, in Babylon, in Constantinople, the disaster wrote the prophecy. The prophecy did not prevent the disaster. The statue's hand pointed east for 900 years before anyone called it a prophecy. What changed? The disaster changed. This is the pattern. The omen written afterward. Collapse does not merely end a civilization's future. It rewrites the meaning of what the civilization left behind. The omen attributed to Justinian's statue did not require the statue's survival. The Marduk tradition persisted long after the object was removed to Nineveh. What survives is not the monument. It is the interpretive need the monument was made to serve. 5 episodes in this cluster have examined cases where prophecy preceded disaster and failed to generate action. This episode is the inverse. The disaster generated the prophecy after the fact. Both are the same shelter. Prophecy before collapse replaces preparation. Prophecy after collapse replaces explanation. Neither changes what already happened. The pattern is named, the monuments remain, the disasters wrote them. Omen History is on YouTube every weekday, Forensic Files every Sunday. Subscribe.